Money habits, much like exercise habits or nutrition habits, run deep. And trust me when I tell you, they are not easy to change. But the reality is that every bit of work that you put in to change your money habits compounds, and it only makes your life that much better in the long run. So even if you're a little bit interested in improving your financial literacy today, I think this video is going to have some tips that you can walk away with that are tangible and actionable. According to the Pew Research Center, 77% of Americans say that they always try to save, but the reality is that only 63% of Americans feel like they're saving enough. On top of that, 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, meaning they don't have $1,000 to cover an emergency expense. In addition, 30% of Americans live with some form of credit card debt, and 1 in 3 Americans do not have any retirement savings. And what's the root cause of all this? Well, it's money habits. So in today's video, we're going to try to break down why people have poor money habits and what you can do about it. So tip number 1 is to improve your financial literacy. And honestly, that takes a bit of curiosity initially to get the ball rolling. So one of the things you can do is to ask the right questions. And it takes a little bit of research and understanding as to what those questions are. But to give you just a sampling of kind of how they can change your perspective a bit, one that comes from the author Ramit Sethi, who's the author of I Will Teach You to Be Rich, is ask $30,000 questions, not $3 questions. This one is an important one because it's the equivalent of being penny wise and pound foolish, meaning you may be so jazzed when you're saving a couple bucks at the grocery store or getting a coffee, but at the same time you're not saving anything for retirement. So it's that dissonance that kind of gets to the crux of the question, and it's a great one to be asking. Another series of questions to really ask yourself is, what do you want to get out of life from money? Money is a tool at the end of the day, and all too often we become victim to money because of things that are in front of us, whether it's guilty pleasures or whether it's peer pressure, anything really. And by understanding and really having a stencil that we can hold up to our money decisions, it helps us to be more conscious of the ways that we're actually spending our money and choosing to use our money, again, in the benefit of what we want out of life. So for example, Ramit, he talks about this concept of money lens. And the idea is, yes, we can look at things purely in terms of cost, but there's also different ways to evaluate how we're spending our money. So whether it's convenience or safety, and one example might be you are trying to find a way to get home from the airport after a long flight and it's late at night. One is you could take the train. A second is that you could actually just take an Uber. And depending on how you value money, whether it's purely based on cost or the convenience, that is one way that will help you to make that decision. Tip number 2 is to hang out with the right people. And whether it's family members or friends, hanging out with the right crew is going to help you to set the right money mindset. You know the people in your life who you think are living modestly, but they could probably afford way more. For example, they drive a Camry, but they could probably afford a Tesla. Those are the people I want you to go talk to because those are the folks that probably have the right money habits. And yeah, having proper money habits, it always doesn't look glorious. It looks, pretty simple and plain. But the reality is that those folks are probably putting whatever extra money that they are not spending, and they're, again, having really clear priorities in terms of what they value. They're putting it into investments. They're putting it into high yield savings. And so one thing you could do is simply ask, how do you manage your money? Oftentimes, it's not just a conversation or a book that's going to inspire you to take action, but it's going to inspire questions. And that's where we're trying to get to with this exercise. To come back to Ramit Sethi's book, he talks about this idea of a rich life, which in his words is basically spending extravagantly on the things you love and cutting back on the things that you don't. And again, these people that live modestly, they're pretty good at that. Tip number 3 is going to be to estimate your monthly expenses. Now, people who have poor money habits, they completely neglect this. They don't care at all about how much they're spending. And don't be like that, right? You want to be able to at least just observe how much you're spending just to get an idea, and it doesn't have to be an exact science. Approximation and estimation is way better than nothing. The first step, just like if you're trying to track your calories, is to make that observation and then actually to do some analysis and understand how can you improve the situation. So how do you do this exactly? Well, I would just recommend first by starting off with a category of a few expenses and then just tracking those from your credit card statements or from your bank account directly, depending on how you pay that, or even just top of mind, what you kind of have as a best guess. So firstly, start with your fixed costs. Those are the things that you are spending on every month, and they really don't have much wiggle room. So those are things like your rent or your mortgage, as well as your groceries, maybe money for gas, depending on how far you have to commute for your job. Also, childcare is another one. Think of these things in your life where they're pretty much just coming in every month and you have to pay for them. And again, you don't have really much wiggle room in terms of the cost of them. Number two is to assess your variable costs. And so those are things like dining out, your subscriptions, or also your travel. And try to think of maybe 5 to 10 things within that list that you can then estimate those costs. Now, once you know your estimated monthly expenses, all you have to do is think about what is the amount of money that you're making every month, aka your income. So after you calculate your monthly estimated expenses, you can then do a determination as to how much of your money is going into your expenses, as well as how much money you have left over for savings. So simply put, take your estimated expenses and divide that by the monthly income that you're making. So let's say you do this calculation on your post-tax income, and after you get an estimate as to how much of your monthly income you're actually spending on your expenses. So after you calculate your monthly estimated expenses, you can get an estimation on your cash flow. And cash flow is simply just income minus expenses. So once we get an estimate of our monthly cash flow, that's when we can start to see if we are in the positive territory or in the negative territory. Just doing that alone is going to bring you some clarity into your expenses. And most people, they don't even get to this point. And finally, tip number 4 is do not fall for the credit card traps. There's really 2 things I want to stress here. The first is we are constantly bombarded with credit card offers, whether it is incentives to sign up and getting a $100 gift card to Amazon, or whether it's to get a bunch of bonus miles. There are tons of incentives being thrown our way to sign up for credit cards. But the reality is we don't need any more than 2 to 3 credit cards. Once you start to open up more than, I would say, 5 credit cards, you run the risk of making payments on those cards and actually losing track and eventually having a late fee that you have to pay. Or even worse, it's gonna go against your credit score. The second thing I wanna stress is to pay your bill off on time and not just to pay the minimum amount, because what happens is that amount starts to accumulate and you're then going to have to pay interest on that amount, which is extremely costly. So again, only buy what you can afford and make sure that whatever you're buying is something that you're going to be able to pay off in full. Guys, thank you so much for sticking around till the end of the video. I hope you found this one helpful, short and sweet, and just 4 simple takeaways that I believe are going to help you improve your money habits and unlearn bad ones. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about financial literacy, I will link 2 videos up above, and feel free to check them out. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions, and until then, see you next time.